Today we're talking about season 6 of Netflix's The Crown, which is also the final season of the royal drama, which for the first time in its run has been split into 2 parts. The first 4 episodes you can watch now, and the second arrive in December. The cynic in me thinks that that was a little bit of a cash grab from Netflix to ensure that it's got those Crown fans locked in for November and December. But what were your thoughts on that decision? Do you think it works creatively?
I think it makes sense creatively. I understand the thinking here because these 4 episodes are so hyper-focused on the death of Princess Diana. And so therefore I kind of understand it as, okay, we're going to have this run of 4 episodes which are entirely telling that story, and then the next 6 will kind of move on to a next phase in the royal family's life. I understand that, but at the same time, it didn't quite work for me. I feel like with this, you need the wider context. I think that's been The Crown's strength throughout, is that you see all different stories of these characters across the years and you see how they change and evolve and how they influence one another. I think that by splitting these 4 episodes off, it feels a bit like, okay, and here's this other story, and then we move back to what the rest of the family are doing, but it should all be interlinked. And I think for me, that didn't entirely work, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was a little bit different to you because I actually think that the weight of the tragedy really sat with me more because we just had these 4 episodes. As you said, they were so hyper-focused on Diana, on her deteriorating mental health, on the increasing press intrusion in her life, and of course the subsequent death and the aftermath of that. It really bore down on me, the weight of that, the tragedy. I haven't really been able to think of anything else since watching it. And of course, we've still got a whole month before the second part arrives. So it did work for me creatively. Nice to differ a little bit there on our points. But in terms of your overall opinion of this first part of season 6, you wrote the review for radiotimes.com. How many stars did you give it, and what was your reasoning?
So I gave it 3 stars, which, you know, last time I gave it 4. So it's slightly lower in my opinion. I think there's a lot to like here. There's a lot to admire. There's a lot, you know, as you say, the emotion, I think the emotion really works. I think it really hits. And do not get me wrong, I think this could have gone much, much worse. I think we spoke in our last video on The Crown about how important it was that they get Diana's death and the subsequent period of mourning right in the show. And I think they handled it sensitively. I think that is the case. But I did have some slight issues with the way that it was presented in terms of, I think a lot of the characters seemed to have this sort of almost like a bit of a prior knowledge that she was going to die. I think there was a lot of sort of, okay, we're building to this big moment, and you feel that there are lots of conversations which bring a bit of closure and that sort of thing, which I understand from a dramatic perspective, but it did take me out of it a little bit. And I felt it was a little bit artificial because I just kept thinking, but nobody knew it was going to be this tragic moment. And I think the tragedy is in that there wasn't any closure. And yet they're sort of giving all these characters all this closure, and really there wasn't any, and that should be the moment it's left on. And then you kind of see the aftermath of that tragic passing. And
that can be a flaw sometimes with dramas that deal with real life tragedies and real life stories, the fact that they lean so heavily into the drama, and it can sometimes almost dilute the real life events. You know, the real life events are tragic enough, they're difficult enough without amping things up even more. That's something that I do have an issue with sometimes. But in terms of this season as a whole, it really moved me more than any other season of The Crown has. Obviously, there have been tragic moments throughout this season where we learned about the Queen's cousins essentially being banished to that institution and never seen or spoken about again, which I thought was really moving. But this, the way Diana's death was handled, Elizabeth Debicki's performance, the aftermath, the effect on Charles, surprisingly, which was a surprise to me. I didn't expect that to move me as much, and also the impact on the boys and the nation, all that just really, really moved me in a way I wasn't expecting. It physically brought me to tears, which I wasn't expecting. And The Crown, as I said, hasn't done that before. I've always admired the show, its high production values, the performances, the casting, the writing, which has its flaws, but by and large has been really strong throughout. But it's never made it into my top shows of the year because I've never felt that personal, emotional connection with it. But with this season, I did so far anyway. There is a whole other half to come. But let's talk about key moments, things that we thought the show did really well, memorable moments. What stuck out for you?
Well, I do think, straight up we should talk about the scene, Diana's death scene. I think that is probably the moment that they know it's coming in this batch of episodes, and there's a lot of probably apprehension around how that's going to be handled. I thought it was handled really, really sensitively and really well. I think the fact that you see that sequence straight away, literally at the start of the first episode, with the dog walker, a really strong way of showing that sequence, and also the fact that you don't see the crash itself, the fact that you see the car go into the tunnel, I think was important, and the fact that you get that out of the way at the start, I think as well was important, because otherwise there might be this sort of thing of this morbid, like you're waiting, it's building, you're waiting for. Whereas no, you've seen that moment happen. Now here's everything that came before it. Here's why it was so tragic, essentially, and then you get it again.
Yeah, the sound mixing as the car disappears into the tunnel, and then we hear the commotion, and also the sound of the car horn blaring. It fades to black, it continues to blare. I thought that was a really just small, the sound mixing was really great this season. The noise of the press all around her, it really overtook me. I really felt that, so I thought they did a great job. And the fact as well that we don't see Diana's body, even when Charles is breaking down in front of her body at the hospital, they made the decision not to show her at all. I respected that decision, thought it was the right way to go, and you did as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was interesting that they do show Dodie's body.
Yes.
Which, I found an interesting contrast, but I do think that moment was also quite sensitive, and it was, really moving. When you see Mohammed sort of kissing his head, it is
stunning.
Still a really, really moving moment. But I just thought it was an interesting contrast, particularly when there's sort of been a lot of talk around not showing Diana's body, that Dodie's body was shown.
Do you think, because I think that moment with Mohammed was so tender, and their relationship certainly in The Crown isn't tender. Mohammed is very overbearing. He's constantly telling his son how he should live his life. They're constantly having furious whispered arguments on the phone in the season. There's a lot of that, and this was a departure from that. Do you think that's why they chose to show him in that moment, to show that contrast? Otherwise, I think we would have left the season feeling quite cold about their relationship.
Yeah, I think so. And again, that leads into also the sequence between Mohammed and imagined Dodie after his death, which is the same thing. It's bringing some sort of resolution to that relationship after he's passed.
Yeah, this is going to sound terrible when I say it, but I'll explain why. The fact that Mohammed is obviously no longer with us. He passed away. Was it earlier this year he passed away? I think I'm almost relieved, because I don't think he would have appreciated his portrayal in this season. He's largely unpleasant throughout. He's just a tornado, a force of nature, and his son is exasperated by him. And Diana, who had a really playful, fun relationship with Mohammed in the previous season, she can't bear to talk on the phone with him. I don't think he would be too happy with how he's portrayed, the fact that he continually wants to push the royal family and the fired family together, even in death, as you pointed out.
Well, exactly, yeah. Even after his son has died, he sort of says, "Well, now I'll be, in mourning with the royal family, and we'll be bonded by our grief." It's quite
grotesque.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it feels quite calculated. We don't know how much of this is true, how much isn't. People dispute every ounce of The Crown, but yeah, I'm not sure he would be too happy about that. Also, we don't see any of Diana's funeral. I was half expecting to hear Candle in the Wind at some point, and at least see part of it before we left the season. Do you think that was an interesting decision? Were you expecting that to happen?
Yeah, I did think it was an interesting decision. I don't think it takes away from that fourth episode, which I think is the strongest of the run. I think the sense of grief is there throughout,
national and global.
Exactly, and I think you do still see that procession, and the crowds weeping on the sides. I think that kind of tells you everything you need to know about the funeral. I think you don't necessarily need to see the service itself. But yeah, I was surprised not to.
Yeah, there's a really interesting line where, is it William who says, "Why are these people crying for a woman that they didn't know?" And Philip says, "They're crying for you," which is true to some degree, but also they were crying for Diana, and you feel the weight of what she meant to people in the season. I think that is handled really, really well. Peter Morgan and Elizabeth Debicki's performance that really get across just what she meant to people. The fact that she was such a departure from your typical royal, and you feel that throughout. You really feel the emotion.
100%. Which brings us on, I suppose, to the ghost moment.
Yes. How did you feel about that?
Yeah.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs a bit down. Not all the way. But look, going into this, we knew that there was some sort of Diana appearing after the death moment. Now, it was always pretty clear that that wasn't going to be a sort of supernatural...
went with ghosts,
yeah.
And everyone else was like,
Yeah, it was clear it was going to be an imagined conversation, which is, a classic trope of cinema and TV for a long, long time. So I was very, I was absolutely fine with the premise. I did think the execution was a little strange because I found it odd that she was leading the conversations, that this imagined version of Diana was telling Charles and the Queen things about herself, about their relationships, guiding them in some way. I found that a little strange. I thought it would make so much more sense for Charles and the Queen to be, giving their final words to her, telling her what she meant to them, sorting through their relationship in their mind. It just seemed a strange way around of doing it. But what did you think of those scenes?
I thought I wouldn't appreciate it, and on paper it does sound a little bit hammy and mannered and forced, but it actually really worked for me, and I think it's because Diana was such a larger than life character. I actually think it fed into that, and I think it was very sensitive and tender, and as you said, I know part of the tragedy, the fact that there wasn't closure, but I actually thought here it was just quite a nice detail to maybe give them something that they didn't have, really leaning into the dramatic rendering of it. I also think, obviously, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino's film, is an alternate history, but I think here maybe this was Peter Morgan being like, you know what, they've had a really difficult time. That was a harrowing moment in their family's history. This might be something nice that we can do for them. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I was so overcome with emotion that I was just feeling really good.
Well, then it clearly worked, that's, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Were there any other things that you think the show did well, or were there any other performers that you thought would particularly stand out?
Well, I think, we have already mentioned her, but Elizabeth Debicki, I thought, was phenomenal throughout this
mesmerizing
run. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I mean, she was in season 5 as well. It's no surprise, but she really did carry a lot of those scenes, and there are a lot of scenes, as we say. She really is the focus of those first 3 episodes. But I also thought Dominic West gave a brilliant performance as Charles, particularly in the final episode of the run. I thought, as you say, those scenes with him are really, really moving, and I thought that also complex and nuanced. There's not like a sort of a clear, well, at this point he's siding with Diana or he's siding with the Queen or anything like that. It's just kind of a complex portrait of a man, and who knows how much of it is accurate, but I just thought it was a terrific performance.
Yeah, he had a lot to do in this season because obviously his relationship with Diana is so complex. We see them kind of reach a sort of a stable place in their relationship, fairly positive when they have a conversation about being good parents for the boys, being better at divorce than they were at marriage. But then there's that flash of anger when he thinks she's been talking to the press. And obviously his relationship with her has been so tumultuous, and he has to manage that feeling of anger and perhaps betrayal that he still has, whilst also being genuinely devastated for his children as well. And at one point, there was affection there, and to lose her in that manner would have been ghastly for him as well. So I think he had a lot of material to manage there, and he did it really well. I was also really impressed by young Prince William as well. I thought he did a great job. He didn't have an awful lot to say, but his body language, his facial expressions, you really felt the emotion come true, and I thought he was a very solid young performer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's likely the last time we'll get to, it's likely that in the next batch of episodes it will be the older version of Prince William, but I thought he did a terrific job in these first 4 and really sort of, hopefully we'll see him in many projects in the future.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the second part. There are still lots of things still to be covered. What are the main events that we can look forward to?
what I think the relationship between Wills and Kate will be a key feature, I think.
Yeah, Peter Morgan has said it will blow the doors off or something. He sounds very excited. There's been talk of an iconic fashion show that Kate takes part in at St Andrews University. She wears a sheer dress and William is agog. So I'm really looking forward to seeing their romance play out. I think that'll be really lovely.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a key moment. And then also, hopefully some more of Tony Blair. I mean, we've seen a very small amount of him so far.
Imagine him standing there saying, hi guys,
yeah,
anything for me to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think the Iraq War will feature? I mean, it's obviously tackled the Falklands War before and other global destabilising events. This was a huge moment for the UK. Do you think it will play a role?
It certainly could do. To what extent, you know, sometimes I think in the episodes, you know, with major world events, they'll sort of give a passing reference to something. And
it's
then
not
other
the show
times
to
it's
go
a
into
whole
detail.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have to see. But yeah, and then of course we've also got two more passings. We've got the death of the Queen Mother and the death of Princess Margaret.
Yeah, and as we know, the Queen's relationship with Margaret was an interesting one. They had their moments. There was obviously the Queen was the reason why, or I say the Queen, it was royal protocol, but it was carried out by the Queen as to why Margaret wasn't allowed to marry Captain Townsend, the love of her life. They've been at loggerheads before. They seem to be in a good place now, but there's always flashes of rivalry along the way. So I'm interested to see the Queen in mourning following that.
Well, there was that mention in these first 4 episodes towards, you know, the protocols of marriage in terms of Charles and Camilla.
Yes, which is a key theme of this season, the fact that the Queen and Philip will not publicly or privately accept their relationship, even though the rest of the family are seemingly on board with them.
And I'm sure that will continue into the next 6 episodes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, still loads to look forward to. We will be there. We hope you will too. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you head over to radiotimes.com for all of your latest TV and movie news. Until next time.